We're down to our two last speakers. It's my pleasure to introduce the next gentleman, Mr. Tim Chichester. Tim is an entrepreneur whose background in Fortune 500 engineering, planning, and financial analysis. Who's got that background? He's well versed in economics and history. Tim has used this broad life experience in the culture wars to advance Christian morality in the public square. Hallelujah. Where is he, Tim? And through conservative activism. In 2001, he started the Catholic Family Association of America in order to fight in the anti-Christian bigotry in the public arena, something the rabbi was just articulating. As president of CFAA and a religious leader, he is a proud signer of the Manhattan Declaration, The Manhattan Declaration is a call of Christian conscience, as well as the Mount Vernon Statement. Tim has always been guided by a love of what has been bequeathed to us by the grace of God through our founding fathers. This led him to belatedly enter the U.S. Senate race against Kristen Gillibrand in the spring of 2010. Tim, please come forward and address what the duty of all free men is in the face of religious oppression. Tim?
The front page of this New York Post has been in my drawer for 18 years. And over the years, I've wondered, is it time to take it out and do something with it? For those of you who can't see it, it's Cardinal O'Connor, and he says, "Jail me." And when he said, "Jail me," it stopped. It stopped back then. So what I'm going to talk about is is courageous defiance. And as I do that, first I'm going to trace a little history. Some 3,400 years ago, a man stood before a king and said the most astonishing of things. He said that the king's authority was limited by God, not the mere will of the king. In Moses, we see that courageous defiance to illegitimate authority that grows within the Jewish tradition. Some 1,200 years later, a man rode into battle under shields and banners marked with Greek letters Chi and Rho, the monogram for Christ. And with this came the long, painful change in the way men saw each other. With the freedom of religion granted by Constantine, the idea that man derived his dignity from his Creator, an idea carried to us from the bosom of Abraham, is unleashed upon a brutal pagan world, a world mired in the unjust economics of slavery. Through the centuries, the hope of the Prince of Peace flowed over the debauched Roman Empire and raised a new civilization, a civilization that saw with increasing clarity that it was true that the dignity of each man was not granted by the state, but was a boon bestowed without price, a boon innate, a boon granted by an unspeakably loving God. The slow progress of Christian humanism, sometimes even glacial, often beset by the selfish nature of the fallen man, ran arrow true and resulted in the rise of what we know to be Christianity, currently called Western civilization, the most creative, peaceful, prosperous, and free civilization ever. That arrow passed through the blood of many courageous men who suffered and died to shape a future that ensured that the state reflect the God-given dignity of man. That arrow passed through a room 236 years ago, through the hearts of men steeped in Christian culture and humanism. Then that arrow sped outward with a flaming banner, emblazoned with words that reflect natural law and the true, innate dignity of man as bestowed by God. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Rights guaranteed by a miraculous political document that began with the words, "We the people." And closed with the words, "In the year of our Lord, 1787. It was a constitution that former slave Frederick Douglass described as a glorious liberty document. We were blessed with a Declaration of Independence that acknowledged the spiritual nature and rights of man, and a constitution to enshroud and enable them, not unlike the melding of body and soul. Following the initial signing of the U.S. Constitution, France's Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens emerged with the generalities enabling an atheistic view quite opposed to Christian culture. In what I believe to be the most calamitous moment in the history of man, a nation declared that God did not exist. The pagans got it right. The murderous Aztecs, demonic in their human sacrifice, understood the reality of a transcendent deity. They may have been 180 off, but they understood the concept. No one has ever thought so small as these enlightened ones who were the proto-Marxists. France descended into a bloodbath that pre-shadowed the atheistic socialist regimes to come. The war on religion itself had become overt. Within 2 generations, the spiritual sewerage spawned from that atheistic ideology was recognizable enough as such a profound danger to civilization that the Vatican condemned communism by name in 1846, 2 years before Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were commissioned by the German Communist League to write the Communist Manifesto. In 1891, 27 years before the Bolshevik Revolution, the war between the church and the socialists for the heart of the working man resulted in the detailed analysis and condemnation of socialism on capital and labor, titled Rerum Novarum, which means new things. In 1917, the war again turned bloody. Lenin, in St. Mary's Academy in St. Petersburg, in the first meeting of consolidation, asked the question, who would be their Saint-Just, referring to the Frenchmen behind the Reign of Terror. And they found him in Felix Dzerzhinsky, Iron Felix, and the terror, the modern terror of the socialist world began in its fullness. The history of the 20th century is that of torrents of blood, shed by the various stripes of Marxists, shed always with the harmonics of miasmic rage about man and his opiate, his religion. I have sketched the history that has led us to this time, to a time when a self-avowed Marxist with sworn animosity towards the Constitution has become so emboldened as to dismiss the First Amendment and crush the Orthodox Jews and Christians, who now are almost the only ones left who understand the peril and have the spiritual resources to resist. The British, those sorry lab rats for the New World Order, having voluntarily reached a level of pragmatic atheism exceeding that of the old Soviet Union, no longer have the power to resist the totalitarian state that is now descending upon them. Others have talked about the healthcare mandate and the need to overturn it. I'm going to now talk to you about the duty we have to actively resist. Since Marxist socialist ideology holds that truth is what serves the state today, and that man is simply an economic unit, any behavior was and is justified. This is a very, very important distinction between Judeo-Christian morality and that of the Marxist socialist. It goes to the heart of why so many Jews and Christians alike have been seduced wholesale away from the foundations that held them fast for centuries. It goes to the heart of why Catholic bishops, charged with the transmitting of the deposit of faith from generation to generation, were surprised by a White House lecture on how they needed to listen to the enlightened ones, the pragmatic Catholic apostates like Pelosi and Durbin, who are so willing to serve our pragmatic atheist and Marxist Barack Hussein Obama. The issue is much greater than the apparent First Amendment abuse. It is about making irrelevant those Christian institutions that constitute the main line of resistance to Marxist dominance over the U.S. political sphere. The strategy behind the abortion sterilization mandate is to make those institutions indistinguishable from their secular counterparts, while loosening the grip of the Constitution. Well, what say you of the threats to close down the hospitals and other vital services? After all, Catholic hospitals make up 13% of all hospitals in the country, 16% of all admissions. Won't closure work? The answer is a very strong no. Not even a maybe. It worked for Cardinal O'Connor in 1994. Why not now? The answer is simple. We are dealing with a president who acts like a hardcore Marxist ideologue. One for whom lying and deceit are resume enhancers. This is a man who has been recorded advocating for infanticide. A man whose advisors hold that the state owns the right to body parts of people who are dead or in certain hopeless conditions. He and his fellow travelers lied through their teeth to the Bart Stupaks, as well as to the American public. What makes him trustworthy now? Let's walk through a possible scenario. Obama strings along the phony negotiations through the election cycle. The purpose to provide delusion of possible compromise for those too weak-minded to accept the reality for who he is. He wins the election. The phony negotiations then fail. The bishops fall back to the worst-case scenario of, I will go to jail and shut down the hospitals. Obama calls their bluff. Excuse me. A slew of hospitals and many of the 400 health care and 1,500 specialized homes that the Catholic Church operates start to close. The crisis grows, the wailing begins, and in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Obama steps into the breach with previously prepared eminent domain filings based upon the infamous Kilo decision and transfers the assets representing over 200 years of Christian ministry to various private, commercial, as well as federal, state, and local entities. Horribly frightening, but possible. To Obama and all Marxists, this is right and just. Let me explain why. In 1965, a 30-something-year-old woman in Odessa, Russia, the old USSR, helped give a World War II widow who was all but starving on her minuscule war widow's pension. The young lady was reported and brought to the militia station, the local police, and warned not to help the old woman. She protested. They said, "We don't care. Just don't help her." A short time later, she was hauled into the station house and warned again. The third time, she was arrested and charged with a felony crime, slander against the state, and sentenced to 18 months of what was euphemistically called strict regime, the hardest of the hard labor camps. The connection I am making here is twofold. One is that most people have never understood the reasoning behind Obama's effort to do away with tax deductions for charitable giving. The ideological component is the same as that used against the woman. The state is and must be the father to all. How dare you presume elsewise? The tax change is part of a web of actions and rules designed to make religious charity impossible, and thereby weaken the only real ideological resistance to Marxism. The other connection is the recognition of the rabid, anti-religious nature of these people. Simply put, you cannot negotiate with them because they simply cannot be trusted. Again, keep the name Stupak in your head.
You bet.
How can we act to make the most of this situation? A glance at the city of Nowa Huta, Poland, provides insight. Nowa Huta was described by Brian Whitmore of the Boston Globe as a place where, quote, where George Orwell's dark vision of a perfect industrial metropolis was executed with stunning precision. Until, that is, the workers rose up and overthrew Big Brother. In this grimy steel town, the workers wanted a church. The communists said no. The Archbishop of Krakow, Karol Wojtyła, persisted and defiantly said Mass on the site for years. Workers replaced every cross removed or destroyed by the state. Eventually, the state caved. What we need now is for our bishops and other religious administrators to publicly defy the mandate and keep the institutions open without compliance. We must not close the institutions. We must keep them open and not comply. We must not give these Marxists the opportunity to seize the assets of religious and charitable institutions. Your duty and mine is to assist them, to encourage them by letters and prayers. But our duty extends far beyond this rally, both in effort and time. We must make ourselves loud enough to be truly heard. We must be vigorous and persistent in creating prayerful and lively sit-ins in our politicians' offices. We need to wheedle, we need to encourage, beg, plead, whatever it takes to get our bishops, rabbis, ministers, and priests motivated to the point of action. We must help them understand that a single pastoral letter to the flock is worthless without the personal courage to lead from the front. We long ago passed from the diplomatic maneuverings of 1938 to the brutal fighting of Stalingrad. That's the level we are now descending to. There's no time for negotiation. We should not be negotiation. We should be courageously defying them. What is needed is direct, forceful, definitive, and ongoing actions by courageous and defiant religious and lay leaders. We need to tell them we will be standing next to them and whispering in their ear, "I will go to jail with you." Yes. And above all, we must pray daily for the conversion and confounding of those whose word and deed threaten us and our nation with such malice. We have a right that extends over 5,500 years of instruction. We have a right and a duty to pray for our deliverance from evil, and we've got to do it. Thank you.